Hawaii. This is Pokah Lainui, and you are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri on radio station KWAI 1080 on your AM dial. The time now is 4:32 on Saturday, the second day of June. I am Pokah, and we have been talking about international affairs, most recently what's happening in Iran, or what the United States is trying to make appear to be happening in Iran, and continuation of the propaganda being put out by the United States. The United States oftentimes are saying this is not who we are. And one, Mike Panic of the Abu Ghraib prison warden, he says torture, quote, is not the norm. Another one, this is not who we are. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton on the U.S. massacre of 16 Afghan villagers. This is not who we are, according to General John Allen, commander of forces in Afghanistan, on Koran burning. This is not who we are, Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta and Hillary Clinton, on troops posing with enemy body parts. I can tell you something all of you know already, that using pepper spray on peaceful protesters runs counter to our values. It does not reflect well on this university, and it absolutely is not who we are, says UC Davis Chancellor Linda Katihi, who ordered the campus police to use force to clear peaceful student occupiers from the campus, leading to pepper spraying of students, ripping families apart. And another article, ripping families apart by deporting the undocumented parents of American-born children is, quote, not who we are, according to President Barack Obama. The latest PR catchphrase from business, administration, military, state, and local officials after some atrocity or other is that whatever happened, it's certainly not who we are. A phrase initially uttered by the Vietnam War Commander General William Westmoreland with reference to the My Lai slaughter of 400 women, children, and old men, all civilians, by a group of U.S. soldiers. Yet if all these abominations are not, quote, who we are, then why do our business, police, and military and government institutions generate so many examples of obscene, horrific, or criminal behavior? If we examine the culture that guides our young men and women in battle, our public safety employees in their duties, or our business class in its pursuit of profit, it's easy to see how shameful and reprehensible episodes such as these have become as routine as they have. Take the military. And I can hear you say, no, you take the military. Okay, let's use the military as an example. The Pentagon achieves its ends through war. Troops must be obedient and willing to kill. This doesn't come naturally, so the military branches have to reprogram civilian recruits, raised to believe killing is wrong, so that they can be part of a murderous enterprise. After breaking down an enlistee's individuality, trainers then teach them to despise, quote, the other, whomever it may be, kraut, gook, raghead, depending on the generations and the particular war. Only after sufficiently dehumanizing both the recruit and the future enemy can they mold the soldier who will do the dirty work demanded by an imperial nation. Then they build these soldiers into super-fit, adrenaline-charged fighters, surround them with propaganda so that demonizes the enemy of the moment and set them loose to, quote, get the job done. The troops who are sent to Afghanistan find themselves in a conflict with no other clear objective, let alone an achievable one. They face an able and motivated foe with a very simple objective: to drive the occupier out of their country. As the U.S. losses mount, frustrations grow, and pressure increases. It is an unfortunate commonplace that armed troops vent their anger with lethal force upon local civilian populations. Their ability to do that is part and parcel of their training that worked so hard to dehumanize these same people. It is a sick hypocrisy for Obama, Clinton, Panetta, or Allen to claim that these actions are not a direct result of U.S. military and foreign policy. If Dick Cheney and John Yoo were torturing language and logic to advocate the torture of humans, why wouldn't guards at Abu Ghraib fall into the same debased state of mind? For example, years after he claimed it was, quote, not who we are, that ahead of the My Lai massacre, Westmoreland himself had issued rules of engagement orders that any civilians found in communist-held territory like My Lai, a free fire zone, were to be considered enemy combatants and treated the same as Viet Cong. Those in power attempt to frame the issue within the, quote, one bad apple in the barrel rubric. As long as they can pretend that war crimes and atrocities aren't a logical outcome of official policy, they can shift blame to those without power and keep the odious policies in place. The cabinet secretary sanctimoniously intones platitudes about morality at the same time as one of his underlings are screaming "kill" into a fresh recruit's trembling face. The same kind of thing happens in the case of police and federal law enforcement officials. Increasingly militarized themselves, they are trained to believe not that their duty is to protect and serve or to uphold the nation's freedoms and liberty, but rather that they are centurions tasked with enforcing order and protecting property, generally government property and the property of the wealthy. The general public then becomes a kind of enemy to be subdued with whatever force is necessary. Those who stand up to their rights under the law are perceived as threats to the authority of the enforcers and are dealt with as enemies, to be beaten, pepper sprayed in the face, spied upon, and locked up. Meanwhile, a farce of morals plays itself out in an endless cycle in the business world. Siemens, Boeing, Walmart are just three prominent recent examples of corporations which have been exposed for using bribery as a standard business practice. Sam Walton may have started his company with some notion of honest, if ruthless, business practice, but the current business culture promotes success at any cost. Coming in second is for losers, and bribery of foreign and domestic officials is just another tool in the toolbox, as they like to say. Just because these shameful acts may indeed indicate who or what our empire's institutions are, it does not mean that it is who we are as well. Most Americans, as well as most Afghans, Iraqis, Iranians, etc., would not commit the types of acts that have made our nation infamous over the years. But if we are truly better than that, if this is not who we are, then we had better do something about the fact we are being represented to the world by the very actions that we find so heinous. Even as countries are being abused by U.S. foreign policy, their people are often slow to blame or hate the American people. They often show a remarkable understanding that governments rarely represent their people's wishes. But we are the nation that is burdened by an impassioned rhetoric that asserts that we are the beacon of democracy, that we are captains of our own destiny. Our supposed innocence of the crimes of empire and rapacious capitalism can be accepted for only so long. Eventually, we too must share the blame for the actions of our government and our economic culture. It is essential that we to hold every level of business and government accountable for every action that betrays American promise, both at home and abroad. It is time to stop pretending that we are not also accountable. It is time to end militarism at home and abroad and to put people before profits. It won't be the militarists and the profiteers who make such changes, though. It can only be us. The article I have just read comes from Dan DeWalt, an activist, of course, and a journalist based in Newfane, Vermont. And he wrote this article for the New Independent, Project Censored, award-winning online alternative newspaper. This can't be happening. That's the name of the article. Well, what do you think about what he has to say? I think there's a lot of value, a lot of truth in what he has said, but I invite you and your opinion on this matter. The article, again, is, what was the name of this article? This can't be happening. Oh, this is not an article, but this is an online alternative newspaper. This can't be happening. The name of the article is, So Then Who in the Hell Are We? And I thank you, Dan. I thought it was very well expressed. This is Poka Lai Nui, or I am Poka Lai Nui, and you are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri, where we deal with a potpourri of views and issues on this program. We will be here till 6 o'clock, and the time now is 44 minutes past the hour of 4 o'clock. Let's go to Haleiwa in a short break, and we'll be right back. And let's have Amy Hanaiali'i Gilliam take us there with her Haleiwa hula.
Oh
That is Haleiwa Hula. Sing it again. Himeniho. Aloha Hawaii. This is Pokalainui. You have just heard Amy Hanaiali'i Gilliam and her rendition of Haleiwa Hula. The time now is 48 minutes past the hour of 4 o'clock here in Honolulu, Hawaii. I am Pokalainui, and you are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri. Okay, we have been talking about a number of issues. One asking if you felt depressed and sort of isolated, and you may be suffering from capitalism. All right. We also talked about what's happening in U.S. policy with regards to Iran, and as well as so who the hell are we if we're not what our actions appear to say that we are? Have you heard that the soldier who was previously facing murder charges in Afghanistan, they dropped, I think, one murder charge, was it? And included 15 more? Here's an article that came out of this morning's newspaper. The Army dropped a murder charge, but added others, including steroid use against a soldier accused in a deadly shooting rampage in Afghanistan. According to his lawyer, Staff Sergeant Robert Bales is now accused of gunning down 16 civilians in a pre-dawn raid on 2 Afghan villages in March. Initial reports pegged the number of dead at 16, but the Army put the figure at 17 when it first charged Bales. So we're still waiting to see how that matter proceeds. Okay, there's another matter that appeared in this morning's paper, and that is with regards to Leon Panetta. Leon Panetta is, as far as I'm concerned, sort of the mafia boss of the agency that can, within the law, rearrange the financing in the United States, and they can take from Department of Human Services, they can take from Department of Education, they can take from all of these service programs and reassess them or place them into the military. They call it the Defense Department. It is actually a War Department. Leon Panetta, who is a Secretary of War, now known as the Secretary of Defense, says that the Pentagon will shift more Navy warships to the Asia-Pacific region over the next several years, and by 2020, about 60% of the fleet will be assigned there as part of a new strategy to increase the U.S. presence in Asia. This according to Defense Secretary Leon Panetta. You remember, who is that? General Dwight Eisenhower, when he was president and in his farewell address, warned the American people of the military-industrial complex. That complex still exists and, in fact, has grown even larger. Some would suggest that even the U.S. Congress itself has its hands in this complex, and it's so locked in that it's almost impossible to break out. Later on we'll talk about what Joseph Campbell may suggest as to that and the hero's journey. But reading on, and this is what the Leon Panetta is saying that the U.S. is planning in terms of its expansion into the Pacific. While noting it may take years to complete the transition, Panetta assured his audience at a security conference in Singapore that U.S. budget problems and cutbacks would not get in the way of changes. He said the Defense Department has money in the 5-year budget plan to meet those goals. Speaking at the annual Shangri-La Dialogue Conference, Panetta provided some of the first real details of the Pentagon's impending pivot to the Pacific. Now, as the reporter reports, and her name is Lolita Baldor with the Associated Press, as she reports these issues, she just reports it, I don't know if you can say matter-of-factly, because she does no analysis, just a report of what Leon Panetta has said. But if you look back at what is really happening, you have that empire, and many people call it the evil empire, now shifting its gaze after going into Vietnam previously, going into and having their games in the Middle East, and still with their arms in the Middle East, now threatening to move into the Pacific and to stir up the waters in the Pacific. But that's not how it is being reported. It's very matter-of-factly, like more celebratorily, like the people of the Pacific should be celebrating the fact that greater attention of the U.S. War Department will be paying attention to what is happening here in the Pacific. Panetta says, it will take years for these concepts and many of the investments that I just detailed, but we are making those investments in order that they be really realized, Panetta said. Make no mistake, in a steady, deliberate, and sustainable way, the United States military is rebalancing and is bringing an enhanced capability development to this vital region. And my question is, well, why? Why are you trying to bring your military into this region? Is it for the sake of assuring peace, or is it for the sake of promoting American business interests further and further into Asia and the Pacific, and simply stepping it up or stepping that investment up? What are the issues? Why do you need this kind of build-up? Okay. To continue on, he says his promises, however, are likely to be met with skepticism from some nations that are aware of the coming budget cuts and having watched the U.S. send the bulk of its military might to Iraq and Afghanistan over the past decade. The expanded ship presence could increase tensions with China, whose leaders have said they are unhappy with any larger American footprints in the Asia-Pacific region. Suppose we turn the tables and China announced that they were going to step up their military presence in the Caribbean or in Central and South America. In fact, they were going to try to develop relations with Canada, and they were going to send patrol ships in international waters bordering the California coastline and the Oregon and Washington coastline. They were going to stay 3 miles beyond the international limit, the same limit the United States recognized as the limit for ships coming into territory. But they were going to be sending ships just to keep its eye, or their eyes, on the United States and make sure that the United States is not building up military forces. Of course, the American people and the United States would be up in arms. But this is exactly the policy that the U.S. has been following over the years. They even sent spy planes flying along that 3-mile border, and the Chinese say, no, they crossed the border, they came into our territory, and as a result, downed one of the spy planes. Is there such a word as downed? I think there is. Okay, and pulled down one of these spy planes and captured the plane and took all the information that they needed out of that plane. And they were adamant that the United States crossed the border. The United States complained that they were in international air. Well, it's the same claim that the Chinese could make if they stayed within international air and flew along the borderlines. Now, of course, everyone would know that the Chinese are now acting aggressively. They're activating this tension in the Pacific arena. But is that not exactly the thing that the United States itself is doing by elevating tension in the Pacific arena? Now, Panetta, who has so much power and is the head of this, what it has been called the Defense Department, says with regards to, and let me see if I can find that, about the number of ships. He says currently the Navy has about 285 ships, with roughly half assigned to each coast. I guess so. That's the West Coast and the East Coast. Is that it? But that might decline a bit as some ships are retired in coming years and might not be replaced. The current fleet excuse me, the current fleet includes 11 aircraft carriers with 6 assigned to the Pacific, but those numbers are slated to go down later this year, dipping to 10 carriers with 5 assigned to Pacific ports in San Diego, Washington State, and Japan. Panetta, however, said he intends to go back to having 6 carriers in the Pacific in the coming years, and he said the Pacific will also eventually host a majority of the Navy's cruisers, destroyers, submarines, and littoral combat ships which operate close to home. Now, as he is talking about all of these military buildup, and as if, we'll assign a ship here, a carrier there, and the rest, the question then becomes, well, what happens to education for the people? What happens to health systems for the people? What happens to all of those other services, the social services that are needed? How much does it cost to support a carrier in the Pacific? And what is the cost for the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education? And I would suggest that the carrier is many more times the total budget of the Department of Education. Okay, enough of that. This is KWAI.
Kaulana na pua o Hawaii, Kupa ama hope o ka aina, Iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino, Pala pala anunu me ka paka. Mane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave, Koku ana honoa o Pilani, Ka ko'o mai kaua I o mano, Pa'apu me ke oni o ka kuhi hewa. Aolea e kau I ka pulima, Maluna o ka pepa o ka enemi, Ho'ohui ai nā ku ai hewa, I ka pono sivila a o ke kanaka. Aole makoa e mina, I ka pu'u kala o ke au puni, Ua lava